The early 2000s was a fascinating time for Disney animation. After a decade of making largely musical adaptations of classic stories, the artists there wanted to try new ideas, and we ended up seeing projects like a Jules Verne-style underwater adventure, a pirate movie set in outer space, and the story of a young Hawaiian girl and her alien friend. And one film from that era, which continues to stick out in the Disney canon in a good way, is The Emperor's New Groove. Here was a farcical, fast-paced buddy comedy with continual fourth-wall jokes, and centered on a selfish protagonist who is transformed into a llama. And yet, it's endured precisely for those reasons, and is an example of how there's always room at Disney to try new things. The Emperor's New Groove is a comedy where the jokes come quick and almost all of them hit. As I mentioned, there is fourth-wall breaking humor, but we also have conversational comedy as the characters bounce off each other extraordinarily well. Being an animated film, there are also plenty of visual gags that take full advantage of what the medium can do. There are even subtle jokes going on in the background that make the movie especially rewarding on repeat viewings, as well as anachronisms. Of course, a large credit for this goes to director Mark Dindal. Having just made Cat Stone Dance, he brought a similar sensibility to The Emperor's New Groove. David Reynolds, who served as the principal screenwriter, also brought his background writing for Late Night with Conan O'Brien by imbuing the project with the needed sharp wit and throwing any gag at the wall in the hope that it will stick. There are so many quotable lines in The Emperor's New Groove, and through the film's slim 77 minutes, there's not a single wasted moment. Each comedic set piece or conversation actually serves the plot in a major way. The filmmakers were able to craft a strong story alongside the jokes, allowing us to be invested in these personalities. This is especially important since the main character Kuzco is not exactly the most likable character at the start. Dindal and his team had the task of making sure we believe the film's events would change Kuzco to be a less selfish emperor. And it works. While The Emperor's New Groove is most famous for its fast pace and wacky comedy, Dindal also allowed the film to slow down at a few points so he could develop Kuzco and Pacha's relationship. These scenes are pivotal in showing Pacha's kindness and how he eventually starts to win over Kuzco. Their chemistry and eventual friendship feels natural because we get these scenes where Kuzco learns a different point of view. The casting of David Spade and John Goodman work exceptionally well. Spade is most well known for playing sarcastic protagonists, and voicing Kuzco allowed him to bring his on-screen persona to animation, as well as the opportunity to branch out, and he really sells the character's few dramatic scenes. The Emperor's New Groove also featured an excellent villain in the form of Yzma, Kuzco's former advisor. The film is clever in showing her motivation in ruling the empire and stopping at nothing to accomplish it. Her raising Kuzco by building up his ego and thinking the entire world revolves around him is also a part of this, as this allows her to really be in control while he comes up with holiday resorts and other nonsense. She's actually quite ruthless, as she does not even blink at the thought of poisoning this boy she has taken care of since infancy. Yzma is also one of the funniest Disney villains, and a large amount of credit goes to two people. One is her voice actress, Eartha Kitt, who does a fantastic job of showing her cunning side, as well as the many ways she gets frequently annoyed at everything going wrong. The other person is animator Dale Bear, who always knows the right expression to give Yzma. Even when she's not the one talking in a scene, I often find myself watching Yzma because her reactions are hilarious. She is joined on these hijinks by her assistant Kronk. When voicing the character, Patrick Warburton is able to portray both his dunderheaded side as well as his occasional sweetness. Even though he's working for the villain, Kronk does not seem to have a malicious bone in his body. Well, unless you insult his spinach puffs, of course. I also like the side characters used to populate this film, like Pacha's family and an old man who disrupts Kuzco's morning groove. Speaking of the groove, the music also plays an integral part in the success of The Emperor's New Groove. While the movie is not a musical like what Disney had spent the past decade making, Sting and David Hartley did write a few songs that ended up in the finished film. The opening song, Perfect World, does a superb job of establishing Kuzco's character, with help from a theme song guy voiced by Tom Jones. You really get a sense of his selfish worldview and why he acts the way he does. The movie then reprises it in the end by changing the lyrics to show Kuzco's new attitude and how he no longer feels everything is about him. There's also the end credit song My Funny Friend and Me, which at first seems like a mood whiplash from what we just watched, but listening to the lyrics, it is able to properly convey Kuzco and Pacha's newfound friendship. Meanwhile, John Debney's score brilliantly matches the breakneck pace of the movie, and he even comes up with fitting themes to represent Kuzco, Pacha, Yzma, and Kronk. Debney also borrows a few music cues from My Funny Friend and Me for the appropriate moments. The whole story ultimately leads to an excellent finale as Kuzco and Pacha try to make him human again and Yzma and Kronk give chase. The last act is one perfectly timed visual and verbal joke after another. Leave it to animation filmmakers to come up with a gag of characters leaving markers behind them. Everything Kuzco has learned over the course of the film comes nicely full circle in the final scene, when he and Pacha use their shared skills to stop Yzma and get himself back to normal. One criticism I've heard of The Emperor's New Groove is that it does not feel like a Disney animated movie, going for more of a quirky, buddy road trip comedy rather than a big, epic, grand adventure. And I personally disagree with that. This was a wonderful breath of fresh air from Disney Animation because it wasn't like anything they had done before, although we still get the memorable characters and inventive storytelling the studio is known for. I love a lot of the musicals and classic tales they've made, but they're allowed to tell other sorts of stories with different tones and ideas. They should not be put into a box. By making The Emperor's New Groove into a farcical comedy, Mark Dindal and his team were able to do something rather unique for an animated Disney production at the time. I think that's why it slowly but surely found a devoted following who's continue to quote the lines to this day. What appears on screen seems like it must have been a breeze for the artists and animators to create, a chance to let loose and do something zany and off the beaten path. However, the reality is that The Emperor's New Groove was a tough production, and its journey to the screen was a complicated one. The movie was originally conceived by Roger Allers, the co-director of The Lion King, as a much more serious film with a bigger emphasis on Incan culture and mythology. Titled Kingdom of the Sun, there was still a selfish emperor. Yzma was the villain, and the emperor would have turned into a llama at some point in the story. David Spade and Eartha Kitt were also hired to voice their respective characters early on. Otherwise, the original idea was very different. Instead, it was planned as a Prince and the Pauper type story, where the emperor encountered a peasant with his spitting image, and they decided to switch places. Yzma, meanwhile, was a sorceress intent on blocking out the sun to stop herself from aging. When she finds out about the switcheroo, she transforms the emperor into a llama. It then becomes a race to stop her from ruling the kingdom and putting out the sun. Kingdom of the Sun would have been a grand adventure in the classic Disney style, with musical numbers and love interests for both the emperor and peasant. Sting wrote a bunch of songs, including the love song One Day She'll Love Me, Yzma's villain song Snuff Out the Light, and a more comical number titled Walk the Llama Llama. Thankfully, those songs are included on the official soundtrack for The Emperor's New Groove. So what happened with Kingdom of the Sun? Apparently, the story was not quite working to the Disney executive's satisfaction, as it was seen as taking itself far too seriously, among other problems, thus leading to multiple changes and Roger Allers leaving the project after realizing the movie would go in a different direction. So out went not only several of Sting's songs, but also the vocal recordings done by Owen Wilson as the peasant and Harvey Fierstein as Yzma's sidekick, a talking rock talisman. Several scenes had even been animated, including the Snuff Out the Light musical number, but those unfortunately had to be thrown away too. Mark Dindal, the story team, and the animators then had to finish the film as quickly as possible in order to meet the new December 2000 release date. Although the production issues did not stop there, as the ending had to be changed at the last minute too. The plan was for Kuzco to build his summer home on a nearby mountain instead of Pacha's village, which really infuriated Sting. He argued that by doing that, Kuzco had not learned a thing, and the filmmakers and executives realized he made a really good point. Almost all of Disney's animated films have gone through these sorts of radical changes during their making, This is actually a very normal thing for animated features, but The Emperor's New Groove definitely ranks as one of the wildest trips to the finished product. Why is there so much available information about this? Well, when Sting was contacted to contribute the songs for Kingdom of the Sun, he said he would do it on the condition that his wife, Trudy Styler, document the production. Disney decided to grant this simple request. Thus, she filmed all the difficulties and changes that led to the film going from Kingdom of the Sun to The Emperor's New Groove. Disney was not exactly the biggest supporter of the Sweatbox, feeling it painted the company in a bad light, and have tried to bury it. I actually disagree with Disney's view on the documentary. The Sweatbox provides a unique and educational look into the production that goes into an animated film. Most of the time we're given the sugar-coated view of how these movies are put together. The Sweatbox instead shows how many million decisions go into these films and the incredibly hard work the crew puts into each one. Seeing the development and production process is a fascinating watch, especially seeing the unfiltered views from Allers Dindal, producer Randy Fulmer, executive producer Don Hahn, and Disney animation heads Thomas Schumacher, Peter Schneider, and Roy Disney. I think the notes given by Schumacher and Schneider are perfectly reasonable critiques. Admittedly, the documentary only gives a few glimpses of story reels and animation, but maybe the film did take itself too seriously. Maybe there were too many characters and plot lines going on. Maybe the film did spend too much time on explaining the Incan society and their mythology. We'll never really know. The Sweatbox also gives us a peek into Sting's songwriting process and how he deals with the strange new world of writing songs for an animated feature. Sting is actually shown to have a bit of a potty mouth, which is probably another reason Disney has not shown it, outside of a single-week movie theater screening and film festivals. Regardless, The Sweatbox is one of the best documentaries on animation I've ever seen. As much as I love The Emperor's New Groove, a part of me does wonder how Kingdom of the Sun would have turned out had it been completed. And that's gotten me thinking. Disney is currently interested in taking their animated films and turning them into live-action movies. I'm not sure a movie as cartoony as The Emperor's New Groove would translate into live action, which is why a remake is probably a long shot. But what if Disney took a different approach and instead attempted to turn Kingdom of the Sun into a live action film? I think with the right directing and writing team, it could be something quite spectacular, and would be a way of showing what could have been, albeit in a different medium. It could be a theatrical release, or with Disney Plus having just launched, that's an appropriate place to experiment by reviving some unmade projects. In the end, at least something was salvaged, and The Emperor's New Groove is a remarkable case of what a talented team of artists can do when presented with a challenge. The result was one of the most unexpected gems to come out of Walt Disney Animation Studios. See you next time.